We'll see what happens.
So the first Mishnah at the top of the page, or
First Mishnah, top of the page, Yom and Aleph. Okay. So what happened was, Omar, somebody said, somebody makes the following statement. Well, there's two explanations. The Gemara will start with the first one first. We'll have to change it as we get through the Gemara. So basically, guy's walking past a cow that's resting, and he's trying to imagine the thoughts of what the cow is saying. I don't fully understand why this is like. I get some of the more extreme cases. This one I think is really pushing it.
that's okay. This is Portland. Cows are people too in this town, so they deserve equal consideration.
Yeah. So and he's imagining this cow is sitting down, and he's imagining what is the cow saying. Now, obviously, a cow doesn't think, but it is not, it's not uncommon, even in Torah itself, to attribute feelings to an inanimate or even animate object, but not a human being. So, for example, as Taisus points out, when the prophet Yonah runs away from God, so he boards a ship, right? The ship is traveling in rough weather, and the ship thinks it's going to break. The ha'aniya chashva lihishavar. Obviously, it's a ship; it doesn't think anything. But it's often terminology that's ascribed to an item as if it were saying something. So this is the fellow imagining what exactly the ox on the cow on the floor is saying. What's she saying? The cow is saying, "Hareini Nazira imay medesani." If I'm too tired now. If I stand up, I should become a Nazir. I want to sit down, relax. Okay, so somebody here is looking at a cow, and he's deciding what the cow means to say. And by repeating these phrases, we presume that he actually means to consider seriously what exactly what the cow is saying. We'll get to more details in the Gemara. We'll get very specific, 4 different versions of the Mishnah. But for now, we won't translate too specifically. Let's just say the cow thinks it's going to become a Nazir if it gets up, and by him telling you what the cow thinks, that's sort of a commitment to agree with the cow's feelings, meaning to commit to whatever he perceives the cow is feeling. Similarly, he sees a door, and this door is jammed closed. So he says to himself that probably the door is thinking, "Hadelas hazeh hareini nazira im niftach." This door is thinking that it should be a Nazir if it opens. Beishamai says that he becomes a Nazir. Basil says he does not become a Nazir. Again, we'll see more details in the Gemara. Okay. Rabbi Yehudah. So Rabbi Yehudah says, Rabbi Yehudah says that even according to Beishamai, we're only talking here in a scenario of where the animal says, if I get up, then I should become a carbon. And the person sort of accepts to do what the ox does, but not Naziris. Sorry? Oh. Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara says the obvious question: Para mika mishtai. Does a cow talk, or does a cow think, for that matter? Complicated thoughts, like I probably learned Masechtas Nazir before it became a Nazir. So yeah, Amar Rami Bar Chama. So Rami Bar Chama says, there was an animal that was resting in front of it. For Omar, and he says, "Kisvura parazu, ena emedis." See, he sees the cow is sitting on the floor and resting, and looks tired. And he says, "But what this cow must be thinking is, I'm not getting up." Hareini Nazir B'Sara Imamda. So he says to himself, I should be a Nazir from its meat if it gets up on its own. And then it does get up to it on its own. So now what's the debate here? Same debate as the previous mission. The previous mission was he's a Nazir from figs. Right, that's what we spoke about yesterday. Today is a weird conversation with the cow, but effectively what he's saying is that I'm a Nazir from your meat, from this cow's meat. Everyone goes according to their opinions. Bishamai that says that if you ban yourself, that if you say I'm a Nazir from figs, then you're a full-fledged Nazir. Hachanami, over here also you're a full-fledged Nazir. Ki Amar B'Sara have a Nazir. B'Sil says, Lo have a Nazir, you're not a Nazir. Gemara says, Amru B'Shamai Chadazimda. B'Shamai already said it. In other words, B'Shamai, why do we need a second Mishnah to tell me that if you're a Nazir from wine and figs, you're a Nazir from everything? The same thing should be true if you say you're a Nazir from a cow and from if you say you're Nazir from a cow, from eating from this cow. So the Gemara points out it's not just that he repeats himself twice. Amrava tarti tlas. He actually repeats himself 3 times because our mission has 2 scenarios. One is of a cow, and the other one is of a door. The Shama repeats himself 2 and 3 times. The Gemara says it's I need to say all 3 scenarios. Why? If it would have said he's a Nazir from figs and dried figs, so I would think that figs and grapes, they're both at least fruits. So sort of maybe he made a mistake, and that's the reasoning of Beishamai, because he somehow confused wine and figs. But if the guy says meat and wine, he wouldn't make such a mistake. Because he wouldn't make such a mistake, so therefore, in other words, maybe the reasoning of Beishamai is not because you're Nazir regardless with whatever condition you put on it, but the reason of Beishamai is because you made a mistake. So therefore, the Mishnah tells me no. The reason of Beishamai is not because you made a mistake. It's because if you say you're a Nazir. Tafas Lashon Rishon, and the second part we ignore, or whatever. I'm sorry. It's Reb Meir. It's Ena de Maitzidor Vatala. Okay, so the Gemara says V'it nar basar. If it was just said the scenario of meat, Hacha hu damri b'shami have an Nazir b'bisr v'chamra av groigers v'elaloi. Okay, so in other words, there is a certain similarity with meat and wine, which is that meat and wine are often consumed together. So this guy is getting confused between the prohibition of wine and gluttony. Eating meat and wine. Not that there's anything wrong with eating meat and wine together. I do too, but obviously they're often associated with gluttonous behavior. So that was his confusion. But maybe he would obviously know that wine and figs are 2 separate things. So therefore, it had to say both. If it would have said both these 2 scenarios, these 2 categories, you can make a mistake. You can make a mistake within different types of fruits. You can make a mistake between meat and wine, because meat and wine are often go together. But with regard to the intention of a door, then I would presume you probably don't become an Nazir. One second. So maybe they agreed to be still. And if it would have just said the scenario of a door, the Itana Dallas, I would think Basil disagrees only by the door. But in the scenario of Bahak Tarti, Kamash Malan. So in other words, the scenario of the door is where he says, I'm prohibited from the door if the door opens. This obviously there's no mistake here of what the definition of Nazir is. You confuse a Nazir with a suitcase, right? There's no real confusion here. So therefore, I would think that if it would have just said the scenario of a door, I would think that Beis Hillel could be agrees to Beis Shammai, in the case of meat and wine, or in the case of figs and wine. That type of confusion. Only by door there's no confusion. That's why Beis Hillel says you don't become a Nazir. But that's why the Mishnah had to say all three groups. Okay, five lines in the bottom. Amar Rava. So Rava rejects the opinion of Rami Bar Chama. So according to Rami Bar Chama, our Mishnah isn't really talking about Nazir, right? Well, it's I shouldn't say that. You're a Nazir. You say that you're a Nazir from a limited group, and you still become a full-fledged Nazir, just like the previous Mishnah. Okay, Amar Rava. So Rava says, "Miktani im amda meilal." In other words, according to Rami Bar Chama, the critical question here is, did the animal get up on its own? Now, presumably, he has to include in the Mishnah the word on its own, because the Mishnah doesn't say the word me'elah. The Mishnah says imamedis, if it stands up. So Rav offered an alternative explanation. Amar Rafa, there was a cow sitting on the floor. 1 second. And according to this version of Rava, so the cow sitting on the floor, and the guy is projecting his feelings onto the cow, and he says the cow is so lazy and tired, it's never going to get up. And if it does get up, it should be a korban. It should be a sacrifice. Okay, so that makes sense that the animal would say it should become a sacrifice. Hold on, what about the door? Covering a door is a sacrifice. So that's the Gemara's question. Bishlam para bas karbani. Okay, so I understand that that a cow could say that it wants to be a korban. El delas bas karbani. 1 second. Hold on a second. Okay, as follows. Sorry, there's more to the story here. When the guy says, "I'm a Nazir," the Nazir aspect comes in as follows. What's interesting is that the Nazir brings 2 sacrifices when he concludes his Naziris. None of those are cow. Yeah. But it seems that it was customary that when a Nazir would finish his Naziris, besides for his 2 sacrifices, he'd also bring a bunch more.
Oh.
And often those would include a cow as an oiler or shlum. So yeah. It was. Sometimes I wonder, like who the characters becoming a zero were. It's like just finishing that thing is cost a couple $1,000. It could be that they were the ranch guys, so it wasn't that expensive. Yeah. Anyway, so basically, what happens here? So the guy sees the cow on the floor, and he says he's projecting at the cow, and he says if the cow gets up, it says that it should be the sacrifice of a Nazir, not just any sacrifice, the sacrifice of a Nazir. Now, what happens if you say I'm bringing the sacrifices of a Nazir? So this is a difficult question, but the Gemara, at least here, presumes that would make you into a Nazir. In other words, that's so close to saying you're a Nazir itself, saying that I am the cause of what will have to bring this as a sacrifice. meaning this as a customary sacrifice at the end of Nazirus, it's so close to Nazir itself that it's as if he said, I'm becoming a Nazir. So basically he's saying is that if this cow gets up, it should be my Nazir sacrifice. I should be what would cause me to bring this as a Nazir sacrifice. Okay, but it still doesn't answer the core question. So that's the Gemara's imposition of what the Mishnah means. But there's still difficulty, and that is, what about the door? The door, obviously, nobody brings the door as a sacrifice when they finish the Naziris. So that doesn't work. Okay, so, well, yeah, it's complicated. Remember, we learned about bringing wood from the fire, and there was a Chagiga, I believe. He is my cousin, I think my cousin. A few families that had the privilege to bring wood. Those families would make a party one day a year when they got to bring the woods. Okay, so Amarava, this is again the third version of the Mishnah. You have this cow sitting down in front of him. Again, he's imposing he's projecting his own imagination onto the ox, the cow, I'm sorry. And he says, this is the cow talking, right? The cow says, I'm not going to drink wine. Im loy amda. Okay, so what's going on here is sort of this man who sees the cow is sort of projecting himself onto the cow. The cow insists on resting, laying down on the floor and relaxing. The cow says, I'm never getting up. If I ever get up, I'm a Nazir. And the guy responds to the cow saying, if I don't get you up, then I'm a Nazir. Right? So he's sort of, it's a battle between the cow and the person. Who's going to be able to get it? Who'll be able to get the cow up? And then what happens? The cow gets up on its own. So now here's the question. Again, the cow said, I'm never getting up. And if I get up, again, obviously a cow doesn't talk and a cow doesn't have feelings, the whole thing. Okay, again, I can't say I understand why exactly the Gemara had to go to such an extreme case. It's a little bit beyond me. The cow is saying, if I get up, I'm a Nazir. The guy says, if I don't get you up, then I'm a Nazir. And then the cow gets up on its own. Okay, so according to the cow's own version, he should be a Nazir. Cow should be a Nazir. The cow can't drink wine or shave its hair. Terrible.
When exactly did animals start to talk to this man? When did he first start having conversations?
It was after he watched, is it Pinocchio? The talking animals? Lion King. Watched the Lion King, and that's what happened. Anyway. Okay. Okay. So now what's the question? The question is, the guy says, I'm a Nazir if I don't get you up. And it gets up on its own. What's the guy's main intention? That's the real question. The intention of when he made this commitment, saying that if I don't get you up, I'm a Nazir. What he meant to say was, literally, if I'm not the one to force you out of your, slumber, then I should be a Nazir. And Basil says, no. I wasn't about me getting you up. It was about about the animal getting up. Basil sovereign because it was resting, and the whole idea was that it shouldn't be resting. But how come it got up? The idea was that I didn't want it to sit down forever, but not that I actually have to be the one to lift it up. Okay. So the Gemara asks, Yahachi Ema Sefer. Let's look at the end of the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah says, Afkasha Amru Beishamai Loy Amru Elaba. Elaba Omer Harehin Alai Carbon. Okay, so in other words, Rabbi Yehudah says that Beishamai is talking about a scenario where what he's projecting on the cow is that the cow will be a sacrifice. But hold on a second. According to this version of Rava, the projection of the cow is not that the cow is saying, I will be sacrificed. The projection of the cow is saying, I will be a Nazir. So the Gemara modifies it slightly. Going to Amar Hareini Nazir Ribsara Im Lo Yamda. V'amda Me'ala. The 1 second. Okay. So now what he's doing is we're combining the explanation of Rav and Barchama, and we're combining the explanation of Rava. We're saying as follows: the guy's projecting on the cow. The cow says, "If I get up, I'm a carbon," and the guy says, "If I don't get you up, then I'm going to bring. I will not eat your meat. You're a carbon to me." And the animal gets up on its own. And again, the debate is twofold here. First of all, Beis Shammai has to hold that this is similar to the scenario of a Nazir from a fig. You become a full-fledged Nazir or not. And second of all, the same machlekes we spoke about earlier. His main intention is that he should be the one to erect the animal. And he didn't stand the animal up. The intention of this person is because the animal's resting. And the animal stood up. One second. Okay, hold on. There's another problem now. According to this version of the Gemara is saying that the explanation of his hill is because we don't know what the animal's intention is. In other words, the animal says, "If I get up, I'm a Nazir." The guy says, effectively, if you get up, if you don't get up, then I'm a Nazir. Not that if I get you up by myself, because he didn't really mean that. He meant if you get up, if you don't get up, then I'm a Nazir. Now, okay, what happens when the animal doesn't get up? We're saying here that the guy said, "I'm a Nazir from your meat." Is Basil going to say that you become a full-fledged Nazir? Of course not. Because Basil says you're only a Nazir if you accept the full range of prohibitions of a Nazir. One second. Because, in other words, Beis Hill not only holds that his intention was never to lift the animal up, but also his intention was never to become a Nazir, because you cannot become a Nazir by saying, "I'm a Nazir from this meat." It's a non sequitur, right? We said they go with the opinion of Reb Shimon that says you have to follow the framework of the type of prohibition you're trying to establish. If you don't follow that framework, it doesn't work. So the Gemara says you're right. Beis Hill never meant to say that if the animal doesn't get up, then he becomes an Nazir. Rather, he was just trying to counter the opinion of Beis Shammai. The Tamayu the Beis Shammai Kamar. Lidi done, according to me, I feel like Kamas Namili have a Nazir. According to my opinion, because he said I'm a Nazir from meat, it's a nonsensical statement and it doesn't work. So I have a Nazir, he doesn't become a Nazir. However, have a Nazir, according to you, that says that a Nazir from figs is a full-fledged Nazir. Aduli Mias at least agreed to me, the Turfid that they engavra Mishum Duravia. That what this fellow actually means to say is not that I will erect this cow, but that the cow will get up on its own. Vakamas, and the cow got up. Okay, and what's Beis Shammai's counter? Beis Shammai laughed to Beis Shammai disagrees. He says no. The purpose of what he was trying to say was that I'm going to lift the cow up. I personally will force this cow to stand up, and ultimately he did not force the cow to stand up, and therefore he's a Nazir. Okay, back to some more what you might expect for Nazir. Okay, so again, I can't. I struggled with this Gemara last night. I can't say I understand why this is such a relevant category, and this whole idea of projecting on the cow sounds a bit odd to me. But this one this one sounds very sounds perfect.
It's a precursor to legalizing mushrooms.
Yeah. They pour somebody a glass of wine. He's at a party. He's poured a glass of wine. But Amr, he says, "Hareini Nazir mimenu." I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine. Hareze Nazir. He becomes a Nazir. Ma'isa be'isha achas. There was a story of one woman. Shahais shikara. she was at a party and she got inebriated. They poured her too much wine. She's inebriated. And she realized she was a little too high. They poured her another glass of wine. So she was intelligent. And she said, she says, Hareini Nizir mimenu. I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine. Sounds like the beginning of the Mishnah, right? She should become a Nazir. But the rabbis heard about the story. She says, no. What she meant to say was that I'm not drinking this glass of wine, but not that I'm a Nazir.
Page position, please, Rabbi.
We're at the end of the Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph.
Daf Yud?
11a.
10b or
11a. Just concluded the first Mishnah, 5 lines down.
Okay.
Again, so we really just go straight into the Gemara instead of explaining the Mishnah. The Gemara points at the obvious. The mice of the story is lister. It contradicts the Mishnah, right? Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah says, you pour a guy a glass of wine. He says, I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine. What's the halacha? He's a Nazir. And Hadutani Ma'isa B'isha Achas. And then you have the story of this drunk woman, Alma B'hai Hudaser. Hayena Achron Ashari. The rabbis say, this glass of wine is prohibited, but other glasses of wine are permitted. So it seems like we have a contradiction here between the story and between the Mishnah. We together? Jules? No. Okay, so the first line of the Mishnah says that if a guy says, I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine, halacha is he has the status of a Nazir. He does not mean to prohibit just this glass. He means to prohibit all wine and all wine. And then you have the story of the drunkard.
Seems totally out of the picture.
And what?
It seems out of the picture.
What do you mean?
Well, the story doesn't seem to go along with.
So so the story only has one minor change, which is that she's drunk. Other than that, the story seems to be an identical story. Skip the part that she's drunk.
Oh.
She says, this glass of wine, I'm a Nazir from. And the rabbi said, hold on, no, you're only prohibited with this glass of wine. Well, why? Didn't you just say that if you prohibit a glass of wine, then you become if you say that I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine, you become a full-fledged Nazir. And the Gemara doesn't really understand why the fact that she was drunk would make a difference. The only difference between the second part of the mission and the first part is that she's drunk. Now, maybe there is a difference. Okay, no problem. So the Gemara is asking, what's the difference? Why does the drunkenness all of a sudden change the status? Or perhaps there's something else going on which the mission is not telling us about. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Mishnah is missing words. This is the full version of the Mishnah. They poured him a glass of wine. And he says he's a Nazir from this glass of wine. He's a Nazir. But if he's drunk, and he says and then he says I'm a Nazir from this glass of wine. He is not a Nazir. My timer. Why is this? Command Amar Harei like carbon. What he's really trying to say is that this glass of wine is prohibited. And if you'll tell me, let him say this glass of wine is prohibited. Why doesn't he just say what he means to say? Why does he say it's a Nazir? So the Gemara says because he's drunk at the party, so he's afraid everyone's going to keep him pouring him more glasses of wine. If he says this specific one is prohibited, they'll just pour him a different one. So therefore, Savar, he thinks, they'll pour me a different glass of wine. I'll force me to drink that one. So if I say I'm a Nazir, they'll back off and they won't pour me any more wine. And the truth of the matter is, it was a similar story. It was a story of a woman who became drunk, and she said the same thing. And the rabbi said, "You're right. Only that glass of wine is prohibited, and she's allowed to continue drinking wine." Okay. Enjoy your morning.
I thought. Go get a glass of wine.
Okay. Does anyone want to talk to cows?
Wait, do we have-